Following the Treaty of Brundisium, which assigned clearly defined borders to the division of Roman territories between the triumvirs Marcus Antonius and Caesar Divi Filius, the two powerful generals saw a shift in their arenas of command. With Marcus Antonius now granted dominion in the east, and Caesar Divi Filius in the west, Gaul, which had formerly belonged to Antonius, became the domain of Caesar. To govern his new province, Caesar Divi Filius appointed his general and die-hard loyalist, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. While serving as governor of Gaul during the 38 BC year, Agrippa was confronted with an uprising led by the Aquitanians. His mastery in suppressing the conflict qualified him to be awarded a triumph by the Roman Senate. Together with his success against Aquitania, Agrippa also commanded his legions against tribes which continually invaded Gaul from across the Rhine Germania. In an attempt to deter their never-ending incursions into Roman Gaul, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa followed in the footsteps of Julius Caesar, becoming the second general in Rome's history to build a bridge, cross the Rhine River, and march his legions onto the lands of Germania. However, despite his effectiveness in Gaul and in Germania, it became necessary for Agrippa to be recalled to Rome when Caesar's naval maneuver against Sextus Pompeius turned into a disaster. During that same 38 BC year, Caesar Divi Filius, having already acquired control of Sardinia and Corsica thanks to the defection of Menedorus, made the decision to take back control of Sicily by devising a pincer attack against Sextus Pompeius. One of Caesar's admirals, Calvisius Sabinus, would launch a portion of his fleet from Etruria, with Menedorus serving as his vice-admiral, while Caesar would launch part of his fleet from Tarentum, with plans to rendezvous on the Lipari Islands off the coast of Sicily. Accompanying the fleets that were set in motion, legions departed Rome, keeping pace with Calvisius Sabinus's fleet as they marched along the coast in an attempt to remove any Pompeian garrisons found. Sextus Pompeius chose to counter the attack by remaining at Messina, near the Lipari Islands. He dispatched one of his admirals, a man named Menocrates, who he positioned to the north of Procita Island to await the arrival of the oncoming fleet. When Calvisius Sabinus saw the fleet of Menocrates patrolling the narrow channel between the island of Procita and mainland Italy, the very channel he needed to travel to reach Lipari Islands, he retired his fleet to the harbour at Cumae for the night. However, after dark, Calvisius Sabinus ordered his fleet to pull up their anchors, halving the coastline so that their movements would be invisible against the grey cliffs. Calvisius's fleet inched closer to the channel. Menocrates, however, had anticipated just such a move and was prepared. One of his vice-admirals, a man named Demarchares, was keeping patrol at the south entrance of the channel. Waiting until Calvisius, who commanded from the centre of his fleet, had fully committed to the channel, Menocrates attacked, hoping to split the Caesarian fleet in two. However, Calvisius's vice-admiral, Menedorus, who commanded from the rear, witnessed the attack. At once, Menedorus charged at full speed, ramming the command ship of Menocrates. As a result of the violent collision, Menocrates lost one full side of oars, while the prow of Menedorus's ship was wrenched completely free from his vessel. Both vessels cast out grappling lines, and soon the scuffled ships were lashed together. Because Menedorus commanded from a quinquereme, his ship was taller than Menocrates' trireme, making it easy for the Caesarian vice-admiral to throw down planks and quickly board the Pompeian vessel. During the fighting, Menocrates was pierced through the thigh with a Spanish javelin that was cruelly designed with metal barbs, preventing him from withdrawing the weapon from the wound. Yet, even while beset with such a terrible wound, Menocrates shouted at his men, encouraging them to fight on until the ship was lost, at which point Menocrates dragged his javelin-pierced leg to the edge of his vessel and threw himself into the depths of the sea. At the head of the Caesarian fleet, Calvisius Sabinus successfully cut off and pursued some of the Pompeian ships that were heading towards open sea, but quickly realized his way was blocked by the patrolling ships of Demarchares. Turning back, Calvisius rushed to aid those ships which had been attacked within the narrow channel, and were consequently run aground in the shallow waters. Unable to move, the grounded ships were under heavy attack. But the return of Calvisius prevented the Pompeians from setting more Caesarean ships afire. Although Sextus Pompeius's admiral Menocrates had perished, the naval battle of Cumae was also a loss for the forces of Caesar Divi Filius, whose admirals Calvisius Sabinus and Menodorus had suffered the loss of more ships than the Pompeians. Demochares, who had patrolled the south entrance to the channel, immediately sailed for Messina to apprise Sextus Pompeius of the battle's outcome. After making certain that Demochares was truly gone, Calvisius Sabinus then used what ships remained to him to ferry the land legions onto the islands of Prochyta and Anaria, where they took control of the harbours. A few days later, the fleet commanded by Caesar Divi Filius emerged through the Messina Straits near Naulochus and entered into open waters. Failing to realign his fleet into a more defensive configuration, Caesar instead maintained the same single-file formation he had employed to navigate the straits. Demochares, who had been promoted to admiral by Sextus Pompeius, shot out of Messina and launched a surprise attack against Caesar's rear. So that his archers could position themselves to fire at the oncoming ships, Caesar Divi Filius ordered his fleet to turn their sterns to the beach and anchor. With Caesar's ships now unable to move, Demochares seized the opportunity to attack both sides of Caesar's ships simultaneously. As the ships belonging to Caesar Divi Filius began to collapse and burn, falling prey to the superior naval strategy of Demochares, the son of Rome's newest god panicked. Just as he had done at the first battle of Philippi, where he had abandoned his camp and had hidden in the marshes, Caesar Divi Filius now jumped ship and swam to shore. Left without a naval commander, Caesar's admirals ordered anchors be pulled up and began attacking Demochares' fleet. Although Demochares was able to save himself by transferring to another of his vessels, his command ship was captured by Cornificius, one of Caesar's admirals. But the Caesarians had lost what is called the naval battle of Naulochus. During the night, a storm bringing violent winds arose and completed the destruction of Caesar's fleet. Calvisius and his men capably navigated around the headland of Scyllaeum, and then rode out the storm in the Bay of Vibo, where Caesar Divi Filius, who had walked along the coast, eventually joined them. Menodorus endured the storm in his ship, well away from shore, but attached to a long cable, and after sailed to the Lipari Islands. Although Caesar failed to take back the island of Sicily from Sextus Pompeius, his naval loss was accompanied by one minor victory. Having ferried the legions from mainland Italy to the islands of Prochyta and Anaria, Calvisius Sabinus had succeeded in taking control of the island harbours on behalf of the Caesarians. With Campania's coast approximately 200 miles from the straits of Messina and Sicily, access to Prochyta and Anaria islands was a critical requirement if Sextus Pompeius was to maintain his blockade of Italy's ports, as it offered a place for his exhausted rowers to rest before raids and for any damaged ships to be repaired. Without Prochyta and Anaria, Sextus Pompeius would struggle to continue his blockade and would find it even more difficult to raid the coastal harbours surrounding the Bay of Naples. Upon the return of Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, following the disastrous naval battles of Cumae and Naulochus, Caesar Divi Filius gave Agrippa command over the Prochyta and Anaria islands. Caesar also gave Agrippa the freedom to transform their harbours into naval bases from which the whole of Italy's western coast, as well as Corsica and Sardinia, might be protected from future naval invasions undertaken by Sextus Pompeius. Caesar also tasked Marcus Agrippa with the rebuilding of the dismantled Caesarian fleet, a project not easily realized while being continually assaulted by the fleet of Sextus Pompeius. To ensure that Agrippa had the proper authority to carry out his tasks, Caesar supported him for the 37 BC consulship, alongside another one of his naval commanders, Titus Statilius Taurus. Although Marcus Agrippa had qualified for a triumph during his battles against the Gallic Aquitanians, he chose to forego celebrating any personal victories in the immediate aftermath of his friend Caesar's great naval loss at Messina. Taking up his consulship on January 1st of the 37 BC year, Agrippa immediately began the work of rebuilding Caesar's military in support of his naval objectives. Just across the channel from Procita Island, approximately 6 miles inland from the city of Naples, and completely surrounded by trees, stood an isolated body of water called Lake Averno. On this lake, which was not visible from the ships of Sextus Pompeius, Marcus Agrippa began the rebuilding of Caesar's fleet. Agrippa also used the secret space as cover for his recruitment and training of new legions to man this upcoming fleet. As part of his large naval construction crew, Agrippa brought in military architects whom he instructed to immediately design and build a canal which would allow the completed ships to travel from Lake Averno and gain access to the Bay of Naples through a hidden entrance constructed in nearby Lake Lucrino. The canal, which would connect Lakes Averno and Lucrino, would need to be finished by the time Agrippa's new fleet was ready to set sail, carrying new legions, properly trained and equipped for battle. Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa had plans to thoroughly astound Sextus Pompeius by launching a completely restored and fully functional naval fleet back onto the seas in one fell swoop, and with it, to take back Sicily for Caesar Divi Filius,